The moment the waiter pulled out the chairs for everyone around the table, I realized there was one seat missing mine. The restaurant was perched on the top floor of a hotel overlooking New York City at night. Lights sparkled below like a million stars spilled across the avenues. The soft clink of crystal glasses mixed with the smell of grilled steak and red wine carried on the smooth rhythm of jazz. At the center of it all was my mother-in-law, Eleanor, smiling that powerful smile of someone who's used to being admired. As I walked closer, everyone was already seated. There wasn't a single chair left for me. Sean, my husband, gave a little laugh, like it was just some harmless mistake. Oops, guess we miscounted. The table chuckled that quiet, knowing kind of laugh people share when they all understand something you don't. Right then, a chill ran down my spine. I tried to keep my voice calm and said, "Looks like I don't belong in this family." No one said a word. Just the sound of a spoon tapping against a plate, and the faint scent of red wine hanging in the air as eyes turned away. I turned around and walked past the glowing tables, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my chest. The second the restaurant door closed behind me, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't the woman who tried to please them anymore. Outside, the cold wind from the Hudson cut across my face, and I stood there in the glittering city with one thought in my mind: it's time they learned what it feels like to be the one left out of the table. My name is Anna Morgan Caldwell, but before that last name ever showed up behind mine, I was just Anna Morgan, a girl from Portland, Oregon, who believed that hard work and kindness could open any door. After graduating from Boston University, I didn't have anyone backing me up. I worked 2 jobs days at a small event planning company, nights waiting tables at a hotel near Logan Airport. I spent years learning how to make an event feel perfect, the lighting warm enough, the wine chilled just right, and most importantly, the guests feeling valued. That feeling was the reason I fell in love with what I do. At 29, I started my own company, Elite Affairs. We didn't advertise or show off online. We built our name on trust and word of mouth. A few years later, I became the person Boston's elite called when they wanted an event that was flawless. And it was at a hospital charity gala that I met Sean Caldwell. He walked up to me with a glass of wine and that confident smile people have when they've always lived above the clouds. "So you're the one behind all this?" he asked, sounding both curious and impressed. "I just try to bring a little order to the world," I said, half joking, half honest. Sean laughed. And in that moment, his eyes didn't look like a rich man's eyes sizing someone up. It felt like he actually saw me, really saw me. After the party, he called. Then he called again. And again. 6 months later, we were officially together. He was charming, smart, and made me believe he was different from the kind of men born into money. He said he admired how I built my career with my own hands. I wanted so badly to believe that. When he proposed at Cape Cod, on a windy autumn beach, I said yes without a second thought. I truly believed I'd found real love, a man strong enough to stand beside me, not above me. But right after our engagement, I met his mother, Eleanor Caldwell. She looked me up and down with a smile that felt like a velvet-covered blade. Self-made. How admirable, Anna. So very American. I knew exactly what she meant behind those 2 words, very American. The Caldwells were old money. Their wealth didn't shout like the new rich. They didn't have to brag, everyone already knew. They dressed simply, but everything was tailored. They spoke softly, but every word tested whether you were refined enough to belong. The first time I stepped into their Beacon Hill mansion, I was stunned not by how grand it was, but by the atmosphere. The silence was so thick you could feel it telling you where you stood. The old paintings, the crystal vases, and the black and white portraits of their ancestors all lined up perfectly on the wall, whispering one clear message: you don't belong here. Sean always told me not to worry. My mom's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean anything by it. I wanted to believe him the way every woman in love wants to believe her man. Our wedding took place in Marblehead, looking out over the Atlantic, and even made it into a lifestyle magazine. I picked the flowers, designed the menu, coordinated every moment of that day. Eleanor didn't criticize a thing, and that's how I knew she didn't have to. She was just waiting. As the fireworks lit up the night sky, I looked at the man standing beside me, his hand holding mine, and I told myself, from now on, I have a new family. What I didn't know was that those very people would be the ones to teach me what it really means to be left out of the table. The first months of our marriage were peaceful. I kept running Elite Affairs, and Sean stayed with his family's investment firm. Our home sat on a cobblestone street in Beacon Hill, where the fall leaves turned red and covered the old stone steps. Every morning, I made coffee, listened to the news, and thought I did it. I really belong here. But slowly, the cracks started to show. The first dinner with the Caldwell family, I mentioned a new project I was managing for a Boston entrepreneur, someone I admired deeply, because he came from nothing, but worked his way up with grit. My mother-in-law set her fork down, tilted her head slightly, and said in that calm, airy voice of hers, "How interesting, Anna." But people who work their way up often don't quite grasp the spirit of high-end events. Still, you're doing wonderfully for someone new to this circle. The table went silent for half a second before the topic shifted. Sean just gave a soft smile, placed his hand on mine, like he was saying let it go. But I still felt that sting inside my chest. It didn't take long to realize that every compliment from Eleanor came wrapped in silk with a hidden thorn. "Anna has such a great eye for design," she'd tell her friends. "It's so convenient to have someone at home who knows how to handle parties." It sounded nice, but I knew what she meant. I wasn't family. I was decoration, something that made their perfect image shine a little brighter. Meanwhile, Sean, the man I thought would be my ally, started avoiding every bit of conflict. When I told him how small and dismissed I felt, he said, "You're being too sensitive. Mom doesn't mean any harm. She's just used to doing things her way." So I learned to swallow it. I smiled through every dinner, every fundraiser, every Christmas gala the Caldwells hosted. I made sure everything looked flawless, the flowers, the wine, the lighting, while others took the credit. And every time, I heard Eleanor say to the guests, "Anna has such wonderful taste. It's like having our own event planner in the family." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But that night, when the bedroom door closed, I sat by the window for hours, staring down at the old gas lamps of Beacon Hill. I'd never felt that house so cold. As time passed, the space between Sean and me grew wider. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and exhaustion. When I asked, he said it was just work pressure. I wanted to believe him, but soon I could feel the emptiness seeping into every dinner, every conversation. He was still kind, still polite, just absent. In our third year of marriage, I decided to throw a small anniversary party, something simple, intimate, just for us. 10 minutes after I sent out the invites, Eleanor called. "That's adorable, Anna. But anniversary parties are best when someone else hosts them. Doing it yourself seems less refined." I said nothing. The party was postponed indefinitely after Sean suddenly had to travel for work. That night, it hit me: some doors only open wide enough for you to look in, never to walk through. I kept working, kept succeeding, but to my husband's family, I'd always be the talented outsider. When rumors started about Eleanor's upcoming 70th birthday, the social event Boston's elite had been waiting for, I saw it as my chance to prove myself once and for all. I'd plan it, and this time, they wouldn't be able to ignore me. What I didn't know was that this event would be the perfect trap they'd been setting all along. And I, the woman who made hundreds of parties flawless, would be the only one without a seat at her own table. That summer, the invitations for Eleanor's birthday started spreading through Boston's high society. The location: Rome, Italy, a full week of luxury, with the highlight being a dinner overlooking the Colosseum. I planned the entire thing. Not because they asked me to, but because I wanted to prove that even if I wasn't born a Caldwell, I could still make that name shine. For 3 months, I lived between emails, sketches, and late-night calls across time zones. I booked Michelin catering, arranged private transfers, and ordered flowers from a small farm in Tuscany. I knew every single detail down to how the sunset light would hit the restaurant's glass windows. But as the plans came together, small warning signs started to appear. Invoices were delayed. Vendors called asking about deposits they hadn't received. When I mentioned it to Sean, he said, "The accountants are sorting out a few international transfers. Don't worry." But I did. And I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. One evening, while he was out meeting clients, I noticed his laptop left open. There, in a maze of spreadsheets, I saw debts, mortgaged properties, failing investments. The glamorous Caldwell name was cracking for me inside. I wanted to confront him. But the next morning, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed. The message flashed on the lock screen. "Can't wait to see you in Rome. Did you tell her yet?" Signed V. I'm not the kind of person who goes through someone's phone. But something deep inside told me to look. And when I did, the truth poured out: messages, photos, promises, even a note about a baby due in 4 months. Her name was Vanessa Hughes, Sean's ex from college. The one Eleanor once called perfect for my son. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my private email, and erased every trace from his phone. By the time the water stopped running, my suitcase was packed. I was still going to Rome. I wanted to see their show and wait for the moment the curtain fell. Our flight left at sunset. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, I looked out the window at the endless layers of white clouds. In that moment, I knew I was flying straight into the storm. But this time, I was the one in control. We landed in Rome at dawn. The light spilling over the domes made the city glow like an old painting. I'd arranged a fleet of black Mercedes to pick up the family at the airport. But the moment Eleanor stepped outside, she frowned. "Anna," I said, "I wanted Bentleys. These look a little common." I smiled. "Italian diplomatic services use these, mother. I thought they'd be classy enough for us." She didn't respond, just turned away. Sean said nothing either. I knew I was no longer part of them, just the tool to bring their final act together, a flawless birthday party and a public divorce. 4 days later, I found the script printed and tucked inside one of Sean's folders. The words hit me like ice. Separation announced in the spirit of mutual respect and harmony. Maintain a positive image for both parties. Below that, speech prep, dinner at Aroma, Rome, 7 p.m. I sat there for hours, each word cut like a blade. And I finally understood they didn't just plan to get rid of me. They planned to rewrite me, to turn me into the tragic headline, the woman who couldn't handle the pressure of privilege, the self-made wife who never quite fit in. I closed the folder, and for the first time in years, I didn't cry. Instead, I started planning something of my own, a plan that would only take 30 minutes, but one they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Rome in June was blazing hot, like the whole city was steaming under the sun. The cobblestone streets around Piazza Navona were packed with tourists. The sound of Vespas echoed through the air, blending with the smell of espresso and cigarette smoke. I walked through that crowd feeling completely hollow. On the outside, I was the successful woman from Boston hosting the most glamorous event of the summer. On the inside, I was just someone being betrayed in her own marriage. The Caldwells were staying at Hotel de Russi, one of the most luxurious places in Rome. I'd chosen it myself, having organized weddings there before. I knew every detail, every rhythm of how perfection should unfold. When their cars pulled up, champagne was already waiting at the reception. Bellmen moved swiftly with the luggage. Everything ran like the symphony I'd written. But the moment Eleanor stepped inside, she said, "I thought we booked rooms facing Villa Borghese, not the Spanish Steps." "Anna, are you sure you confirmed correctly?" I kept my professional smile and explained that this direction had better afternoon light for the family photos. She didn't listen, just nodded, the kind of nod that meant she was filing it away to use against me later. The next few days, I was quietly erased from everything. In the mornings, Sean said he had meetings with his father. When I came down, they were already gone. At lunch, they had unexpected plans with old friends. By dinner, I saw their faces on someone's Instagram smiling in Trastevere, glasses raised, not a sign of me anywhere. That's when it hit me. This wasn't coincidence. They were writing a script, slowly cutting me out, so when the divorce announcement came, I'd already looked like an outsider. It all came crashing down on the 4th night. When I walked into our hotel room, Sean's briefcase was open. Inside were draft divorce papers and a property settlement offer a pathetic fraction of what we'd built together. At the bottom was a handwritten letter from Eleanor, her looping script smooth as silk. Once everything's finalized, Vanessa will return to her rightful place. We must keep things clean, no scandal. My hands trembled as I held that paper. Part of me wanted to scream, to tear everything apart. But the other part, the one trained to notice details, contracts, fine print, started remembering. I took photos of everything and sent them to my secure email. The next evening, they had a wine tasting event outside the city. I told them I had a headache and stayed behind. The truth was, I sat in my room with my laptop open, reviewing every contract, the restaurant, the hotel, the transportation, the tour guides. Every single one was under my name. Elite Affairs. I was the guarantor for all expenses. Then the thought hit me sharp and clear. If I disappeared, everything else would too. The morning of the birthday dinner, I woke early to print the final confirmations. While I was in the hotel's business lounge, I heard Eleanor's voice at the concierge desk. Calm, deliberate, each word cutting through the air. There will be 12 seats, not 13. My daughter-in-law won't be joining us. It's a family matter, please don't ask. I froze. Every last piece fell into place. They planned to humiliate me right there, in front of international guests. A perfect dinner where the poor wife would quietly excuse herself, letting them play the gracious victims. I walked slowly back to my room. Each step echoed like a countdown clock. In the mirror, I saw my own face, calm, dry-eyed, steady. They want a performance, I whispered. Then I'll give them one. The perfect ending. That afternoon, I called Marco, the manager at Aroma, the restaurant hosting the dinner. My voice was soft, almost a sigh. Marco, I need an additional confidentiality clause. And a backup plan, one that activates only when I give the signal. He paused for a few seconds, then said, I understand, Signora Caldwell. I smiled for the first time in days. Rome, with all its ancient monuments and buried secrets, was about to witness a show even Eleanor Caldwell could never imagine. Sunset fell over Rome like a painting on fire. The light poured over the old rooftops, bathing the city in shades of honey and gold. The restaurant, Aroma, the one I'd spent months planning, sat on the rooftop of a historic hotel, facing the Colosseum. The symbol of glory and ruin. A perfect place to end an empire. I arrived an hour early, just as I always did. I checked every detail: white peonies in full bloom, candles perfectly aligned, gold-lettered menus, crystal glasses spotless. Marco, the restaurant manager, walked over and asked quietly, Everything according to plan, Signora? Perfectly, I said, my voice calm. No one will ever forget tonight. I left to get ready, wearing a deep sapphire Valentino dress, the one I'd once saved for our 5th anniversary. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone else staring back. Not the wife trying to fit in anymore, but a woman who finally understood the power of silence. The family gathered in the hotel lobby before leaving. Eleanor was stunning in her classic Chanel gown, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. When she saw me, she smiled, that thin, practiced smile. Anna, you really do know how to dress. I'm glad you remembered tonight's an important occasion. I just nodded. Sean stood beside her, fixing his collar, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Maybe he didn't expect me to look this composed. Our cars arrived under the soft golden lights of the city. When the elevator doors opened to the rooftop, the scent of flowers, the clinking of crystal, and smooth jazz filled the air. I walked in last, slow and quiet, like a director watching the final scene of her own play. Eleanor entered to applause. She took the center seat, with Sean beside her. Guests began taking their places. I walked toward the round table I'd arranged with 13 seats, but now there were only 12. No chair for me. No name card. No sign I was ever meant to be there. For a few seconds, I just stood still. My mind froze. Then Eleanor's sweet, cutting voice broke the silence. Oh, is something wrong, Anna? Some kind of mix-up? I looked around, averted eyes, polite smiles, a small laugh from the far end of the table. And then Sean, with the same charming smile I once loved, said the line I knew they'd rehearsed. Oops, guess we miscounted. The table laughed. Soft. Polite. Full. I felt the blood rush to my face, my heart pounding in my chest. But instead of breaking down, I took a breath, smiled, and said clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like I don't belong in this family." The words dropped like a stone into still water. The laughter stopped. No one spoke. Only the distant music kept playing. Sean frowned slightly, but he didn't move. I turned and walked away, step by step, the candlelight stretching my shadow across the marble floor. When the door closed behind me, I heard Eleanor exhale the sound of someone finally removing the last flaw from her perfect picture. But what she didn't know was that the picture was already burning. I stood on the terrace, the night wind brushing against my shoulders, looking out at the Colosseum glowing under the Italian sky. I pulled out my phone, opened my company's event management app, and smiled. They had 30 minutes to enjoy their victory. After that, everything, the tables, the dinner, the reputation, would come crashing down. I sat in a small cafe right across from the Aroma restaurant, where I could see the entire rooftop glowing under the lights. The waiter brought me a cup of dark espresso, its foam soft as velvet. I took a sip, bitter, sharp, but grounding. On my phone, I opened my contact list, people who had trusted me for years because I was always professional, reliable. Tonight, they'd trust me one more time. The only difference was, this time, the event I needed wasn't to be hosted but canceled. First was Marco, the restaurant manager. I sent him an email confirming the contract termination under the change of authority clause, attaching my digital signature and a refund confirmation back to the company's account. Then I called the vineyard in Tuscany, where the family planned to have a private lunch the next day. Postpone indefinitely, I said, my voice flat and calm. They agreed right away after I confirmed the refund. Next came the Amalfi yacht, the Vatican tour guide, the weekend villa, each call, each cancellation handled with the precision of someone who'd been in the business for a decade. Across the street, I could see their silhouettes moving around the table. Glasses lifted, candles flickering. In that soft light, I saw something that used to terrify me: perfection. But now, it just looked pathetic. By the time I transferred all refunds back into Elite Affairs' account, my phone showed 9:27 p.m., exactly 30 minutes since I'd left the dinner table. That's when Sean's first message appeared. "Where did you go? Mom's worried. Come back, don't make a scene." Then another one, a little more urgent. "I'm serious, Anna. We'll talk after the dinner, okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I typed a single line to Marco. "Activate the backup plan. Start now." Across the street, I saw him lean toward the restaurant staff. The lights on the rooftop flickered for a second. A few waiters froze mid-step. I took another sip of espresso, letting the bitterness coat my tongue. Then my phone buzzed again. "What are you doing?" "The restaurant says the contract's been canceled." "Anna, this isn't funny." I set the cup down, paid the bill, and walked out. My heels clicked against the cobblestone pavement as I circled around to the staff entrance behind the restaurant. Marco was waiting. He handed me a card and gave a small nod. "Everything's ready, just like you asked. When you give the signal, we'll make the announcement." "Thank you, Marco. I won't forget this." I stood in a narrow hallway, hidden but with a clear view of the dinner through the frosted glass. 12 people, faces I once thought of as family, now strangers. Eleanor was raising her glass, her face glowing under the light. Sean sat beside her, forcing a smile, checking his phone again and again. Then Marco approached Richard Caldwell, my father-in-law, and whispered something. I watched Richard pull out his wallet, his expression shifting from calm to irritated. Eleanor looked up sharply, asking questions. Marco shook his head. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Sean shot to his feet, his chair toppling over. My phone rang, his name on the screen. I answered. "Anna, what the hell did you do? They're saying the whole event hasn't been paid for. The entire week could be shut down. Did you cancel it?" "I just did what made sense," I said evenly. "If I'm not family anymore, I shouldn't be paying for their parties." He went silent for a few seconds, then yelled, "You're humiliating us. You know this could kill my mother, don't you?" "I know exactly what'll kill her," Sean the truth. I hung up. Through the glass, I watched Marco step forward and address the guests. His voice was calm, apologetic. Everyone froze. Eleanor's face went pale. Richard turned red with anger. Melissa grabbed her phone, panicking. And Sean, the man who once swore he loved me, just stood there, speechless. It was beautiful, like watching fireworks go off in slow motion, every spark fading into silence. I stood there, feeling my heartbeat settle into a steady rhythm. For the first time in years, I wasn't the planner behind someone else's perfect evening. I was the director of my own story. I left the restaurant a little before 10. In the distance, church bells echoed through the streets, blending with the sound of cars crossing the square. The night air in Rome was warm, but I felt strangely cold inside, the kind of stillness only people who've endured too much can understand. The next morning, the first message arrived. Eleanor Caldwell had left the hotel before sunrise without paying the dinner bill. The manager texted to say they'd quietly accepted her diamond necklace as collateral until payment was made. In high society, that was a slap in the face, silent but devastating. My phone started flooding with messages. "Are you out of your mind?
Sean.
You made me end up in the hospital with high blood pressure. Eleanor. You've ruined this family's reputation. Melissa." I didn't reply. I just forwarded all the files, the debts, the mortgages, the hidden emails to my lawyer, with one short note. "If they sue, make it public." 2 days later, a small article appeared in the Boston Globe's business section. Caldwell Investment Group under investigation for asset report fraud. That one headline was enough. Investors pulled out, clients canceled contracts, and the calls started flooding Sean's office. Within a week, everything they'd tried to hide for years burst like soap bubbles. I flew back to the US in first class, the ticket paid with my own travel points earned from the very events I once organized for them. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was relief. I'd finally walked out of a burning house. When I got back to Boston, I didn't return to Beacon Hill. I rented a small apartment in the Seaport district close to the water, where the wind carried the smell of salt and the sound of ships in the evenings. I had my things moved, only keeping what was truly mine: clothes, a few pieces of jewelry I'd bought myself, my book collection, and photos from before I was married. Everything else I left behind. A week later, Sean showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, tie loose, eyes dark and hollow. "We need to talk," he said quietly. I crossed my arms. "If you came to apologize, it's too late. If you came to blame me, don't bother. Anna, you don't get it. The SEC is investigating. My dad could go to prison. My mom just lost her board position. Everything's falling apart." I looked at him, the man who once promised to protect me from the coldness of the world. Now, here's the coldness. "This is consequence, Sean. I just held up a mirror so you could see what you've done." He stepped closer, voice shaking. "I can fix this if you hand over those files. I'll sign anything you want." I paused, then said softly, "You really think I did all this for money?" He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I stood, looked him straight in the eyes. "I don't want anything from you. I just want freedom. And you and your mother finally gave me that." Sean lowered his head, then quietly walked away. The door closed behind him, leaving only the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. The following week, the headlines began to spread. In Boston social pages, one small title read, "The Caldwell family, once a symbol of prestige, faces financial scandal." Beneath it was a photo of Eleanor at a canceled charity event. I didn't smile. I just poured myself a glass of white wine and stood by the window, watching the lights of Boston Harbor shimmer across the water like shards of glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel a tremor in my chest. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I didn't need a seat at anyone's table. I had my own, and one chair made just for me. A year after that night, I came back to Italy, not to Rome, but to the Amalfi Coast, the place I used to dream of visiting, but only ever came to for other people's parties. This time, I was here alone as the event planner for a high-profile Hollywood wedding. I stood on the terrace, looking out over the turquoise water, listening to the soft waves breaking against the cliffs. The air smelled like salt and orange blossoms. In the sunlight, everything shimmered like a dream. I checked my phone, scrolling through vendor confirmations, and stopped at one familiar line: Elite Affairs Executive Director, Anna Morgan. 3 simple words, but enough to remind me how far I'd come. When I started over, no one believed my company could survive the Caldwell scandal. But old clients returned, the ones who had watched me stay silent through the storm. They understood something others didn't. I wasn't just an event planner. I was someone who knew how to keep secrets and sometimes how to use them. Every now and then, I still heard about the Caldwells. Their firm dissolved, their assets investigated, their debts exposed. Eleanor was no longer Boston's charity queen. Sean married Vanessa, and the baby was born just 2 weeks after the wedding. I don't hate them anymore. Sometimes I even pity them, because in their world, love was just another contract, one that never got signed. That afternoon, I was setting up the wedding dinner. The chairs were perfectly lined up under the Amalfi sunset. I walked around, checking every detail: candles, flowers, wine glasses. Then I noticed an empty chair at the end of a table. I paused. For a moment, Rome came rushing back: the cold stares, the fake smiles, and that moment I said, "Looks like I don't belong in this family." But this time I smiled. I set a glass of white wine on that chair, raised my own, and whispered, "This empty seat, it's finally mine." The sea breeze swept through, carrying the sound of laughter from the guests nearby. I took a sip of my wine. No bitterness this time, only the soft, sweet taste of freedom. I used to think winning meant watching them fall. But real victory is when you stop caring whether they ever stand up again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat down in that chair, watching the sunset reflect across the water, and realized after everything I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, to find your place in the world, you have to walk away from the table where you were never meant to sit. When the wedding ended, the guests left, the music faded, and I stayed by the shore. The golden lights from the villas along the cliffs shimmered on the water like 1,000 shards of glass. No one was calling my name. No one was waiting for me in that cold house on Beacon Hill. All I could hear was the sound of the waves, steady, slow, patient, like the rhythm of my own heart. I opened my old notebook, the one I'd carried since college, and began to write. Not a plan, not a checklist, just a few simple lines. Today, I don't have to prove anything anymore. I don't need to be accepted. I just want peace. I thought of the girl I used to be: young, ambitious, building her company from nothing, believing success would earn her respect. But when I stepped into the Caldwell's world, I learned something. People obsessed with power never truly respect anyone but themselves. They buy everything: status, beauty, even marriage, like another piece of decoration for their empire. I once wanted so badly to please them, to become part of that glittering dynasty. But the day they pushed me away from their table was the day I got myself back. I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair. The wind carried the scent of lemons from a nearby garden, mingling with the salt in the air. Somewhere down the hill, a Vespa hummed past, its sound fading into the distance. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze move through my hair. For the first time, everything felt still: no anger, no bitterness, no more asking, why did they do that to me? When I checked my phone, I saw dozens of unread messages: partnership offers, invitations to speak, even one from a TV network asking me to share my story, the woman who turned humiliation into strength. I smiled, then turned the screen off. I didn't need to retell it. That story was done. It belonged to me now. Before leaving Amalfi, I stopped by a little antique shop. There, I saw an old oak chair, the paint chipped, the wood worn, but the frame still solid. The owner said it came from an old villa in northern Italy. I bought it and brought it back to the new Elite Affairs office in Boston. Ever since, That chair has stood alone in the corner of the meeting room. No one sits on it. No one touches it. When clients ask, I just say, "It's there to remind me if they don't have a seat for you, make your own." A year later, Elite Affairs became the leading partner for international events in New York and Miami. The press called me the woman behind unforgettable parties. I didn't deny it, but I didn't brag either. Because in the end, parties fade. Flowers wilt. Music stops. But that chair remains quiet, steady, unshaken. And sometimes, at the end of the day, when the office is lit only by the glow of city lights, I sit down in that chair, take a sip of wine, look out over Boston, and whisper to myself, I've come back to who I am. And this time, I'm never leaving my own table again.